Listener supported, Chicano Studios. This is Latinx Social Justice, the show from Chicano Studios about the things we think about a lot.
Crime.
Social disparities.
Geographic segregation.
Racism.
Affordable housing and urban development.
Lack of education.
Incarceration.
Inequity.
And need to talk about more. I'm Daniela Rodas. Marin County, California is considered one of the richest counties in the nation. But while the majority of white inhabitants bask in upper-class prosperity, immigrants from all over Latin America come seeking the same pathways to success. Although, living in such a high-profile area comes with its share of hardships for these communities, including lack of affordable housing, systemic racism, anti-immigrant sentiment, and incessant policing of these minority ethnic groups. The area known as the Canal in San Rafael, California, is one of the places that house a large Latin American immigrant community. Immigrants have made up this industrial area that starts at the intersection between Highway 580 and 101. To provide some background on Marin, it is the second richest county to live in California, and the 13th in the nation, according to California's list of locations by income on Wikipedia. In the article, Marin County Race Counts, published in 2015, it was stated that Marin had the number one worst racial disparities in the state of California. 84% of Marin County law enforcement personnel are white. Meanwhile, Marin County's overall population is 72% white, 16% Latino, 2% black, and 10% other. Marin County's incarcerated population is 45% white, 27% black, 21% Latino, and 7% other. Marin's monthly median rental price is the nation's highest. Almost 85% of the county is off limits due to development, and affordable housing is all but unavailable. Housing finance discrimination in Marin means that Black and Latino borrowers face higher denial rates and receive a much smaller number of prime loans. This is only made worse by the lack of affordable housing in Marin. In an article written by Richard Halstead titled Marin's Latino Community Bearing the Brunt of COVID-19 Crisis, published by the Marin Independent Journal on May 31, 2020, 68% of people who tested positive for COVID-19 in Marin were Latino, despite only 16% of the county's population being Latino. Most of these cases were centralized in the Canal district. Only 26% of whites, 4% of Asians, and 1% of blacks have been tested positive for COVID-19. As a high-traffic location, it has been linked to high crime rates, large geographically segregated Latinx populations, and has been a product of systemic racism within the county. Today, we're going to be talking about crime, social disparities, and geographic segregation of Latinos in the Canal community. Latinos have been known to be the backbone of our labor force in California. They have been on the front lines of our essential workforce throughout the shelter-in-place order. Therefore, the virus has circulated that community thoroughly, allowing for massive amounts of transmissions. Marin County Public Health Officer Dr. Matt Willis stated that the high incidence rate among Latinos is all about work. Low-income Latinos were more likely to get infected at home due to the high cost of housing they have and the amount of crowding there is in the Canal apartments. They're coming home to a setting where there may be 6 to 10 people living in a 2-bedroom unit. It is not unusual to find that multiple people live in the same household and have been infected, stated Willis. In the article On the Divide, Examining Residential Segregation in Marin County, California, by Felicia Burgess, published in 2015, she conducted a critical analysis of the racial and residential segregation within the area. 80% of its residents are white, and 2 of Marin's major minority populations have been geographically concentrated in places like Marin City, which holds a majority of the African American population, and the other being the Canal District in San Rafael. According to a 2009 U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development investigative report, half of all Latinos in Marin County live in the Canal. But what brought this amount of people to seek to inhabit this area? Back in the 1980s, civil war in Northern and Central America and places like Guatemala and El Salvador led to an influx of refugees to the area, which began to change the demographics in Marin County, Burgess stated. The Canal District has consistently established themselves as a center for diversity in a mostly white county. Yet, the segregation in this community has perpetuated poverty, and people living within the district have been subjected to social isolation and inequality through the inhibition of social mobility within these groups. They also suffer from high rates of crime, inequity, and poverty, as well as one of the highest morbidity and mortality rates than any other of the surrounding communities. In COVID-19 times, we have seen a significant amount of health disparities that have faced areas that have been ethnically defined. In the article, Combating Racial Health Disparities Through Medical Education, The Need for Anthropological and Genetic Perspectives in Medical Training by Deborah Bolnick, published in the fall of 2015, common causes of morbidity and mortality fall along the lines of racial, ethnic, and class borders, and most of these ethnic groups are impoverished, uninsured, and underrepresented. It is known that within these groups there is a higher prevalence of disease and morbidity. Access to healthcare is also lessened, as well as the quality of medical care and health outcomes for individuals. If there was more medical education in these geographically segregated groups, this would help healthcare providers and other public servants in the community better understand the complexities of race and the causes of racial and ethnic disparities. Minority individuals would feel more inclined and less afraid to advocate for themselves so that they are heard. Which leads me to my next point. In the article, Voces de Canal, Building Safe Communities Through Strong Partnerships in the Canal, written by Julia Vanderin et al. And published in 2014, public safety amongst the community has been a pervasive issue for the last decades, with a majority of residents stating that they did not feel safe in the canal area. Public safety is linked to social inequities, and there is no single cause of neighborhood violence, although crime is a byproduct of the amount of unemployment, poverty, discrimination, substance abuse, educational failure, domestic violence, fragmented families, and feelings of powerlessness, writes Vanderin et al. The amount of poor neighborhood conditions and infrastructure have not helped alleviate any of the criminal activity, as residents have reported that there is a mass amount of inadequate street lighting, lack of appropriate signage, or safe pedestrian walkways. But most pressingly is the mistrust Latinos and the Canal community have in the police. Police presence in the Canal serves merely as a constant reminder of dominion and fear of deportation amongst the Latinx community. Within this group, there have been many cases and stories of abuse and discrimination from law enforcement officials. Police in the area also tend to mainly hyper-focus on minor infractions, like driving without a license or loitering, while ignoring the more pertinent issues in the community, such as shootings, gang activity, theft, and drug distribution. There is also a lack of Spanish-speaking officers, which has led many to have miscommunications with law enforcement, leaving many misunderstood and unrepresented. A consequence of these issues with law enforcement's presence in the community has led many youth living in the Canal turning to gang involvement in response to police harassment and violence. This association with being in a gang allows individuals to feel like they have some form of power and are not entirely defenseless. Nowadays, public safety has become a pressing issue within the neighborhood, with 1 in 5 residents surveyed saying that they were a victim of crime with relation to gang violence, assault, theft, and domestic violence, according to the article Canal, an Immigrant Gateway in San Rafael at Risk by Mitchell Crispell, published by the Center for Community Innovation at the University of California, Berkeley in June of 2015. Law enforcement has not provided any actual aid in making it a better place to live in. Rather, they have contributed more to the dangerous reputation of the area. As a widely known immigrant-receiving neighborhood, due to the civil strife that many of these people face in their home countries, the influx of immigration over the decades has allowed for people to seek out better opportunities for themselves. Today, we will be interviewing a man named Emilio. That is not his real name. Emilio immigrated here as a teenager from Guatemala during their civil war back in the 1980s, and we will begin to talk about his experience living in the Canal District back then and now, right after this public service announcement.
Everyday people from all over the world decide to leave their countries. Whether this is because of violence, corruption, economic disparities, or the need for opportunities, many seek refuge here in the United States, where we together become a nation of immigrants working to achieve our individual versions of the American dream. The Canal Alliance exists as a resource for Latino individuals in the Canal area and helps over 3,700 people yearly. As a nonprofit organization, they have dedicated themselves to meeting the needs of this socially and racially isolated groups in one of the richest counties in the nation. Their mission is to promote principles of fairness, equality, equity, and social justice across intersections of religion, age, color, and ethnicity. If you're in need of legal services, education, career programs, and social services, please contact them at 415-454-2640 or visit during their office hours from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday at 91 Larkspur Street in San Rafael, so you and your family can overcome barriers to success.
Todos los días, personas de todo el mundo deciden abandonar sus países, sea debido a la violencia, corrupción, las discrepancias económicas o simplemente a la necesidad de tener oportunidad a una mejor vida. Es por esto que buscamos refugio aquí, en los Estados Unidos, donde juntos nos convertimos en una nación de inmigrantes que trabajan para lograr nuestras versiones individuales del sueño americano. La Alianza del Canal existe como un recurso para las personas latinas en el área del Canal y ayuda a más de 3.700 personas anualmente. Como organización sin fines de lucro, se han dedicado a satisfacer las necesidades de este grupo aislado social en uno de los condados más ricos de la nación. Su misión es promover principios de equidad, igualdad y justicia social en los aspectos de religión, edad, color y etnia. Si necesitas servicios legales, educación, programas profesionales y servicios sociales, comunícate con nosotros al 454-2640 o visítanos durante nuestro horario de atención de 9 de la mañana a 5 de la tarde, de lunes a viernes en el 91 Larkspur Street en San Rafael, para que podamos ayudarle a usted y a su familia a superar las barreras del éxito.
Listener supported, Chicano Studios. This is Latinx Social Justice, the show from Chicano Studios about the things we think about a lot and need to talk about more. I'm Daniela Rodas. Welcome back to the show. We're here today with Emilio. Hi, Emilio. How are you?
Hello. I'm good, thank you.
So, tell me a little bit about your initial experiences coming to the United States. Why did you decide to leave Guatemala?
Well, back in the 1980s, the political situation in Guatemala was pretty bad, to the point that we thought it wasn't safe to be in Guatemala, and on top of that, there is no opportunities.
What type of experiences did you have in Guatemala that made you make that decision to come here?
Well, I graduated from high school, and then right after that, you start looking at the potentials that you have, even if you graduate, that there is almost none. And you're always thinking about having a better future for yourself, and the only way of succeeding over there is by probably start doing your own business, but that's hard because everybody's doing the same thing. And even if you have some education, it doesn't go very far unless you know the right people to get you connected. But then again, you're not the only one who's doing that. There is many people trying to do the same thing at once. So you get to the point that there is no possibilities, that the economy is horrible, that system is also pretty bad. And of course, you're looking at your relatives who are working and barely surviving. So then there's literally no other option but emigrate to the States.
Did you ever feel like there was a threat to your life?
Yes, of course. As we all know, in the 1980s, the Civil War was pretty bad. I emigrated here in the 1986 when the situation was getting better, but the previous years, it was pretty bad.
Can you describe what was happening?
Yeah, there was a civil war, but on top of that, and I'll tell you a small experience that I had. I had a couple of cousins that were going to school. They were older than me. And they had a friend, and this girl got involved with a guy in the army. So it turns out that the girl decided to move on and broke the relationship. Well, the guy in the army was a sergeant, as far as I recall. At the time, nobody knew, but they went after the girl. They kidnapped the girl. And then they kidnapped my cousins, two of them. One of them, there was actually a third one that was able to emigrate to Canada, running away from this situation because they came for the girl first, and then they came for the other cousin, and eventually they came for the other one. and I was also close to them. So of course I was afraid that eventually they might come for me. Because as by saying this, of course I was afraid. At the time, like I said, nobody knew what was going on, but eventually things started coming out, and we knew that not only there was a civil war, but at the same time, um, it was all within the government as well.
How did the Civil War affect you, and what did you see?
Well, it did affect me by being afraid constantly. We couldn't travel very far, and I recall one time that we actually had to travel to Guatemala City. And as we were driving towards Guatemala City and this place that is called Los Encuentros, I was driving with my dad, and suddenly on the side of the road, we could clearly see 10 bodies that were lined up right against the road. And there was a sign that said, "This is what happens when you join the guerrilla." We were, at that time, we couldn't even talk when we saw all these dead bodies lined up right against the freeway. And it was mostly indigenous people. But they probably didn't even have nothing to do with the guerrilla, because as we all know, in most cases, the guerrilla will come and contact them, and just by doing so, the army will accuse them of being in touch with the guerrilla, and they will come after them.
Tell me about your experience, your first experiences living here in the United States.
Well, when I immigrated to the United States, that was back in 1986, and first place that I came, it was to the Canal area in San Rafael. At that time, it was mostly Anglos, but there was a few of us Latinos, and at that time we were pretty afraid of going out because we were afraid of the police. We heard all kinds of stories, and of course that was one of the main concerns of ours. And of course, being an immigrant, undocumented immigrant, it was even more for us. Even though we weren't doing anything bad, I decided to go to school.
Can you remind us how old you were?
I was 18 at the time.
And you decided to go to school where? Can you tell me about your school experiences?
Yeah, so when I came to the States, I decided to go to school. I was 18 at the time, so I went to San Rafael High for the last year. Of course, it was pretty hard because I didn't speak the language, and I had to pay for all my. I had to pay for rent and everything that I needed. At the time, I found a job in the evening, which will start from like 5 till 2 p.m., 2 a.m. in the morning. And that was a really big sacrifice for me, being a teenager and having to deal with all this situation of going to work from 6 to 2 a.m. and then going to school at 7 a.m. And of course, I didn't drive at the time. I didn't have a license or anything. So I will have to wait for the bus in the morning. And of course, the first bus will, they stop working, I think, from midnight till 5 a.m. So in most cases, I had to wait at the place that I work after I get off of work and kind of find a table or somewhere that I could just fall asleep for a couple of hours until the next bus will arrive, which was 5 o'clock in the morning. We'll go home, and I was sharing a living room with another cousin because I was barely making enough money to pay for my rent.
And how much was rent back then?
Well, I was living with another cousin, and my cousin told me that she let me stay in the living room with my other cousin, and I was paying about maybe $150 a month at the time. But that's how much one of my checks was every other week, maybe a little bit more than that, but I barely had enough to pay for the rent and, of course, for my own food, transportation, and everything else that I needed to survive.
So tell me about your friends and cousins that you associated yourself with.
So when we started going to high school, one of my cousins, he's actually the one that said, we gotta go to school. So we did, and I said, yes, that's a great idea. We did go to school, and of course, being undocumented, I was pretty afraid. I did go to school, and I was able to get enrolled. But the fact that I didn't have a social security number created a little bit of a problem. But thank goodness there is good people out there. And I remember this teacher that she had a great heart. She helped me a lot. She motivated me to keep coming back to school every time. At some point, I was able to talk to her more, and she will listen to our stories. I wasn't able to graduate out of high school for the same reason that it was too much for me. I wasn't really at school for the same reason that I couldn't sleep, or I didn't have enough sleep. So eventually I dropped high school, and so did my cousin. I decided to move on, look for another job, and continue going to college. See if I could get my GED. My cousin decided to go the other way. He decided to start to join the gangs and literally started doing drugs and all kinds of other things. I moved away from that.
Could you tell me why you think he went into this route?
Well, I guess living in the Canal area, for what I understand, and like I felt the same way, that we were afraid of going out. In the time that we went out, we always felt like we had we always felt that the police will come and get us. So we were definitely afraid of that. Well, the reason I think he decided to join the gangs is because he probably felt that he needed some protection. Of course, that is not the right way. That is not the right thing to do. But being 18, I think he was 17. He was 1 year younger than I was. He felt, and I think I experienced that with a lot of all the kids that were at about the same age, that they felt like they needed some sort of a protection. And that's why I think they decided to join the gangs.
Okay. Tell me more about your impression of the police and how you were telling me you felt criminalized even though you weren't doing anything wrong. Were there ever any encounters that you had with them that made you feel this way, or stories you heard?
Yes, at the time, I had couple of encounters. It wasn't nothing drastic. I got pulled over a couple of times. I'm not sure if it was like sort of a racial profiling at the time, but I happened to I didn't do any crime or anything, and they eventually will let me go. But I heard a lot of stories about all the people where they will, impound their cars. But there was definitely few cases where people were just, I guess, just racial profiling, and even though they didn't do anything, because most of the people that I met, that I hang out with, were hard-working people that were only interested in finding a job and having a decent life. But at the same time, yes, we were afraid, and we had this in the back of our heads, that if the police will pull you over, or that you was going to lose your car and probably end up in jail for the fact that you were undocumented.
Do you feel like you ever experienced any forms of racism?
I didn't actually feel, I guess, the fact that maybe I have a little bit of a light skin, so that might help a lot in my case. But I definitely heard stories of friends that went through difficult situations with the police, and a lot of them end up in jail. And in most cases, I knew all these people, and they didn't do anything wrong other than, just being undocumented or
Being brown?
being brown, exactly.
Did you ever receive any additional resources?
I never did. We were always afraid of reaching out to get anything. I remember going to the Canal Community Alliance. They help the Latino community a lot. I never actually got anything from them, other than the reason I will probably go there was to look for a job or a place to live, which they were also had sources that they could connect you with.
Do you feel like police presence in the Canal community do you feel like their presence served as any actual form of aid, or was it more of a reminder of their dominion?
I would say that it was both. But yes, we felt mostly that it was some sort of a yes, just like you said, establishing dominion and intimidating in a way.
Emilio, thank you for being here. That's all the time we have today, folks. We appreciate you listening and staying tuned with us. Thank you to all our listeners. You're listening to the Latinx Social Justice Channel. Stay tuned for next time. See you soon, everyone. Listener supported, Chicano Studios.